Those of you who watch the show know that my team is the New York Football Giants, and I wear Giants gear on the show. Eli Manning's probably my favorite player. I grew up with Eli Manning. And again, the Eagles are enemies of the Giants, and I grew up in here with a lot of Eagles fans. And I'd be the first one to tell you if the Eagles weren't good. I'd be the first one to take a sigh of relief that they're not good. Carson Wentz, even as a Giants fan, you never root for injuries ever. You don't. And the fans that are rooting for injuries are classless, and that's the wrong thing to do. And Carson Wentz is a great person on and off the field. Very likable player, even though he's an enemy of the New York Football Giants. Very likable player. So now, without Carson Wentz, which is a really sad situation, the Eagles now have Nick Foles at quarterback. And Nick Foles is a guy that can stand in the pocket and make throws. He is the reason why Nick Foles is not a franchise quarterback is because Nick Foles is a statue. He has Tom Savage feet. He can't move from side to side and make throws. His footwork are not fast enough to ever be a quarterback that can be a franchise guy. He's like Ryan Mallett. Big arm, but his feet are stone feet. Now, Nick Foles, though, he can go play action. You can snap it to him in the shotgun. And if you're throwing in shorts, Nick Foles is like Hackenberg. He's going to light it up. And Nick Foles is a guy that can push the ball down the field, especially with the weapons that the Eagles have, with Nelson Aguilar, with Zach Ertz, who's, I think, probably the best tight end this year in the NFL. With Alshon Jeffrey, who can make circus catches and who can make plays, in one-on-one coverage, and can go out and just high point balls and make ridiculous catches like he did yesterday. So when I look at the Eagles, I don't think that they're done at all. Because the Eagles, the remainder of their schedule, they play the Giants, and that's going to be a dead win going on the road to MetLife. So Nick Foles is going to get inebriated or initiated, whatever the heck that word is I'm looking for, initiated, and he's going to have a very easy time going to New York and getting a win. So then he's going to come home and play the Raiders, and they're a dog shit team, and with a quarterback that can't throw in cold weather, with a team that is completely just their chemistry's off, the Oakland Raiders, and there's no way the Raiders are beating anybody on the road, and not the Eagles. And then you have the Cowboys. And by that time, the Eagles would have then been, I believe it's 13-2 at that time, which is pretty incredible to think about. So I think the Eagles by that time might have locked up home field. If they played the Cowboys with Carson Wentz, they'd beat them handily. With Nick Foles, I still think they have a very good chance of winning. I think that the Vikings need to win all their remaining games to make the Eagles have to sweat it out and beat the Cowboys. Anyway, the Eagles are getting a bye. So then the Eagles are going to be playing a home game in the playoffs. So Jim Schwartz's defense is playing a home game in the playoffs. That's Brandon Graham, that's Derek Barnett, that's Timmy Jernigan, Fletcher Cox, and Chris Long, the best defensive line maybe in the NFL. Combine that with Nigel Bradham, and combine that with Malcolm Jenkins and Patrick Robinson, McLeod, and Jalen Mills. That is a pretty damn good defense. That's about an A- defense. Jim Schwartz, the cold weather, the crowd will be electric. It will be a great, great crowd, very difficult to play in. And that pass rush wins Super Bowls. So that pass rush wins championships. I've seen it with the Giants. I've seen it with teams like the Baltimore Ravens. If you have a pass rush, that's how you win championships in the playoffs, by getting after the other quarterback. And the Eagles have the pass rush. They have the running game. They have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And Nick Foles is a suitable quarterback. No quarterback could function with Jeff Fisher. You saw Jeff Fisher leave, and Jared Goff went from being Ryan Leaf to now being a Pro Bowl quarterback that looks like Jared Goff could be. If I had to compare Jared Goff to a quarterback in his trajectory, it might be Matt Hasselbeck, a guy that plays 10, 12 years in the league, a guy who makes the playoffs a bunch, a guy who can function, can make deep throws, can move the offense down the field. Jared Goff went from being a Brandon Weeden with Jeff Fisher to now being a quarterback that could potentially have a 10 to 12-year career and be a Pro Bowl quarterback. That's how shitty Jeff Fisher was at developing quarterbacks. Jeff Fisher was a guy that was in this league probably too long consecutively, and even though he took the Titans to a championship, it was very tough for Nick Foles to succeed in St. Louis. Now, here's what's going to happen. Doug Peterson needs to simplify the game plan for Nick Foles. You can't turn into Chip Kelly, and that's what Doug Peterson tried to turn into yesterday with throwing Nick Foles like 25 times and just playing the game like it was Madden, and he was playing with guys that don't actually have bones and structures because quarterbacks can't throw that much and be successful. So maybe Doug Peterson was trying to rest his run blocking for the playoffs. Maybe he was practicing pass blocking. The calls yesterday were terrible. I don't think he called a good game whatsoever. And the toll that it takes on quarterbacks to throw that much is just, it's crazy. It really is. So these are the teams that I think can beat the Eagles at home in the playoffs. I think Seattle and Russell Wilson can do it because they have the defensive line to hit Nick Foles. If you're going to beat the Eagles, you better hit Nick Foles. The good news for teams that now they don't have to play Carson Wentz is Carson Wentz is a magician. He's Houdini. He can make magic happen. He's the MVP of the league, one of the most talented quarterbacks that we've seen in quite a long time, and he's dominated football this year. He was like Cam Newton 2 years ago with the Carolina Panthers, just a guy who you couldn't stop. So now Carson Wentz is out. You now have a guy in Nick Foles that if Nick Foles' first read isn't there, he has trouble getting to his second read. If you have a pass rush and you can win. Stop the run and hit Nick Foles. If you give Nick Foles time, then Nick Foles can actually beat you, hence what happened yesterday. So if you have good edge rushers, you're going to have a chance. And you look at Seattle's edge rushers. They have Averill. They have Bennett and Sheldon Richardson. They have Russell Wilson, who's a quarterback that can go on the road and clutch out and win playoff games, just like he did in Washington, just like he did in Minnesota. Russell Wilson can make magic happen, and he can win road playoff games. We've seen that before. So Seattle, if Seattle plays the Eagles, Seattle will have a very good chance to beat the Eagles. Then look at another guy who has beaten the Eagles in the playoffs and who's actually beaten Nick Foles. That guy is Drew Brees. And that team is the New Orleans Saints. They have a running game with Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. They have guys like Michael Thomas who can catch the football. Not only Thomas, I know they have Ted Ginn, who is a pretty good weapon. They have Fleener, who can catch the ball, and Hill. But they have a very good running game, and Mark Ingram is built for the cold. He's ironically not even built for the dome. He can play outdoor smash mouth football. Sprinkle that in with Kamara on the edge, you're going to wear down Jim Schwartz's defense. Drew Brees went into a very hostile Philly crowd 3 years ago when Chip Kelly was thought to be the second coming of a tremendous NFL coach, and Drew Brees pretty much ended the Chip Kelly regime on the spot. The Saints won on a last-second field goal to beat the Eagles against Nick Foles, 27-2 Nick Foles, and Drew Brees has been there, gone to the link, and done that. So the Saints. Then the third team I think the Eagles should fear, I'm going to go with Carolina. I look at Atlanta's defense, and I was thinking Atlanta, but Atlanta has a very good defensive pass rush of Claiborne, of Vic Beasley. They have a good defensive coach in Dan Quinn, who I think is a rock star, and everybody just wants to worry about the game in Houston, the Super Bowl last year. But they seem to ignore the fact that Atlanta won the NFC in as convincingly of a manner as we've ever seen before. And they were in the Super Bowl for a damn reason in Dan Quinn's second year. So the guy can flat out coach. He's a clutch football coach. He's a very good football coach. I look at that defensive line. I look at if Alford comes back healthy. I look at that Jones linebacker who's really playing well, who made all those interceptions. That's a defense that is pretty damn good. But do I trust Steve Sarkisian in his play calling? Tevin Coleman and that offensive line with Freeman will be okay, but I don't think they'll gash Philly. And then Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan, whenever he has to play outside of the dome, he loses. He lost to the Arizona Cardinals in 2011. He got wrecked by the New York Giants in a game I went to. Matt Ryan has never won a playoff game outside of the Georgia Dome. Matt Ryan got destroyed by the New York champion football Giants. I watched that game. Matt Ryan will turn into a statue. He will play small in cold arenas, okay? I trust Cam Newton going on the road. I saw what Cam Newton did to the Vikings yesterday. Cam Newton is a magic man. Cam Newton is clutch. Cam has the arm strength, the mental fortitude to be a champion. The guy's just a winner. He's won at junior college level. He's won at the college level with Gene Chizik as a head coach. Cam Newton and Carolina, you look at Kuechly, Thomas Davis, that defensive line. I think Peppers is still on that team. Kawan Short's a very good defensive lineman. Starla Tuilei is a good defensive lineman. They'll be able to stop the run. They'll be able to get in and play okay. Their cornerbacks are not still great. I don't really love their corners, but yesterday showed me a lot. So the Vikings, though, the reason I'm not mentioning them is because they're probably not going to be playing the Eagles in the wild card. The Rams, I don't trust Jared Goff to go into Philly and play in the cold. And I don't think Todd Gurley's going to have near the success in a road playoff game. So I think that I think that Atlanta and Carolina, I'll go Carolina 3, Atlanta 4, but the top two teams, the Eagles, the teams that can beat the Eagles are Seattle and the Saints. And I think the Eagles have a very decent chance of maybe drawing the LA Rams or something. And I think that the Eagles have a pretty good chance, though, of actually still doing this thing, of actually getting through the NFC. They only are 120 minutes away from making the Super Bowl. When you get home field advantage, your path to the Super Bowl is very doable. And it's not like Nick Foles doesn't have experience. I mean, we've seen guys like Flacco get there. We've seen Kaepernick, Alex Smith get there. Well, Alex Smith didn't get there, but he got pretty damn close. We've seen Case Keenum is playing really well this year. Joe Flacco's a guy that won a Super Bowl championship. So there's quarterbacks. You don't have to be an incredible quarterback in order to win. Brad Johnson won. Trent Dilfer wins. Jake Delhomme wins. He made a Super Bowl too. So looking at who the Patriots had to beat, I know that Brad Johnson, I talked about him. Matt Hasselbeck is a guy that made a Super Bowl as well. Kurt Warner, Roethlisberger. Then you get into some pretty good quarterbacks. Peyton Drew Brees, yeah. But there's quarterbacks. It is doable. It is doable for Nick Foles to win 2 playoff games with that defense in Lincoln Financial Field in the month of January. It's doable. It's not almost a lock like Carson Wentz now. If Carson Wentz was healthy and they beat the Rams, I think that they would be very difficult to beat with home field. But I think Nick Foles has a chance. And if you're going to beat Nick Foles, you force him to go to his second read. You blitz him. You can hit him, get him on the ground. And Nick Foles is not a guy that's a mobile quarterback. And that's how you can get him, and that's how you can win playoff games. You win with pass rush. Alrighty, guys. Thanks